In 1901, this man sold his company for $480 million. He wrote the number himself on a slip of paper in blunt pencil. He personally kept around 225 million of it, and he refused to take a single share of stock. He demanded gold bonds instead. So much paper that a bank in New Jersey had to build a special vault to hold it. He had arrived in America aged 12 with nothing at all. Measured against the size of the economy he actually lived in, that fortune is worth about $281 billion today, second in all of American history, behind only Rockefeller. And then he spent 18 years trying to give nearly every penny of it away. This is how a weaver's son built the thing that made it, what it cost other men, and where the money finally went, because almost none of it went to his family. Andrew Carnegie was born in 1835 in a small stone cottage in Dunfermline, Scotland. His father William wove fine damask linen on wooden handlooms in the room below where the family slept. Then the steam-powered loom arrived, and by 1847, William Carnegie's trade was simply gone. His mother bound shoes at night for $4 a week. In May of 1848, they sold the looms and sailed for America. They landed on the 15th of July. Andrew, 12 years old, went into a cotton mill as a bobbin boy for $1.20 a week, then a boiler room at $2.50. Then, at 14, a telegraph messenger, and this is where the whole life turns, because he taught himself to read the telegraph by sound alone, without waiting for the paper tape. It was a rare skill, and it made him visible. In February of 1853, a Pennsylvania railroad superintendent named Thomas Scott hired him at $35 a month. That man would matter more than steel. One morning Scott was not there, and the wires were carrying trouble on the line. A boy of 18, with no authority of any kind, sat down and began issuing train orders over his employer's name. If he had been wrong, men would have died. He wrote later about exactly what went through his head as he did it. He was not wrong. Scott called him that little white-haired Scotch devil of mine, who ran every train on the division in my name without the slightest authority. 6 years later, at 24, Carnegie ran the entire Pittsburgh division on $1,500 a year, but look at what he was really earning. In 1863, his income was $42,000, and only $2,400 of it was salary. The rest came from investments Scott had walked him into and lent him the money to buy. At 28, he already understood the whole game. You do not get rich by being paid. You get rich by owning the thing that pays. And now the vehicle, not steel in general, one mill, built on one idea. In 1875, he opened the Edgar Thomson Steel Works at Braddock, Pennsylvania. First blow of the converter, the 22nd of August. First rail rolled, the 1st of September. And he named the works after Edgar Thomson, who happened to be the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, which happened to be the largest buyer of steel rail in America. Thomson, to his credit, initially said no. And look where he put it. The site touched the Pennsylvania Railroad, the Baltimore and Ohio, and the Monongahela River, 3 separate carriers, so that no single one of them could ever squeeze him on freight rates. Thomson complained that Andy should have located his works a few miles farther east. Of course he should have. That was precisely the point. His real innovation was not the Bessemer process. He bought that. It was accounting. He demanded cost sheets down to fractions of a cent, department by department, every month, at a time when most American firms did not know what a ton had cost them until the year was over. The first sheet, October 1875, 1,119 tons, $57 a ton to make, $66.50 to sell. He knew his margin to the penny while his competitors guessed, and a man who knows his costs can cut his price to a level that quietly bankrupts everyone who does not. The result of all that lands on an entire country. In 1867, a ton of steel rail cost $166, exactly twice the price of iron. By 1898, it was $17.62, an 89% collapse in 31 years. That fall is why America could suddenly afford skyscrapers, bridges, and 100,000 miles of new track. Carnegie became extraordinarily rich by making the most important material in the world extraordinarily cheap. Then came the move that turned a great mill into an empire. He stopped buying his inputs and started owning them. Coke first. Henry Clay Frick's Coke Works, because 10 tons of raw coal cost $2.50, and the same coal baked into Coke sold for over $14. Then the ore, then the ships, then the railroad that carried it off the ships. Every profit that used to belong to a supplier now belonged to him, and it is only honest to say that the greatest of those moves, the Mesabi or ranges, was Frick's idea. Carnegie resisted it. He said there was nothing in it. And now the part no honest telling can skip. Homestead, 1892. First correction, it was not a strike, it was a lockout. The company moved to cut the wage rate from $25 a ton to $22, and when the union would not sign, the works were closed against the men on the 28th of June. Around that mill, Frick had already built a solid board fence 3 miles long, topped with barbed wire and pierced with holes as though for rifles. The men called it Fort Frick. It was standing before the talks failed. 300 Pinkerton agents came up the Monongahela on 2 barges before dawn on the 6th of July. The town was awake and waiting on the bank. The fighting lasted roughly 14 hours, and when the Pinkertons surrendered that evening, 7 steelworkers and 3 Pinkerton agents were dead. 8,500 state militia then occupied the town for 95 days. There were 167 indictments and charges of treason against the state of Pennsylvania. Not one man was ever convicted, and the Union at Homestead was not rebuilt for 45 years. And where was Carnegie? At a shooting lodge in Perthshire, 35 miles from the nearest telegraph. The day before the battle he had been in Aberdeen, opening a library he had paid for. Afterwards he told the public he had no power to instruct anybody. His own letters say otherwise. Non-union forever in June. Never employ one of these rioters, let the grass grow over the works. On the 7th of July, historians still divide over whether he authorized it or deliberately built himself a distance he could hide inside. What is not in dispute is what he wrote at the end of his life. 9 years later, it ends in a single sentence. In December of 1900, Carnegie's own company president, Charles Schwab, gave a dinner speech in New York describing what one combined American steel company could do. J. Pierpont Morgan was in the room. Morgan sent word asking what Carnegie wanted for his share. Carnegie wrote a number on a slip of paper in blunt pencil and had it carried across. $480 million. Morgan glanced at it and said, "I accept this price." United States Steel was chartered in February of 1901, capitalized at over $1.4 billion, the first corporation on Earth worth more than $1 billion. Carnegie took around $225 million of it, entirely in 5% 50-year gold bonds. He refused stock outright. That refusal is the best commercial decision of his life, because by 1904, United States Steel Common had fallen below $10 a share, and Andrew Carnegie had not lost a cent. And the men who bought it knew exactly what they were buying. 10 years later, the Federal Bureau of Corporations went through the books and found that of that capitalization, $682 million was tangible property, mills, mines, ships, and $720 million was, in their own words, intangible considerations and water. More than half of the largest company in the world was air. Their report also gave the real reason for the price. The new corporation had paid very liberally for earning power, and perhaps more important still, for the elimination of Mr. Carnegie. Then he spent the rest of his life getting rid of it. 11 years before the sale, he had already published the argument in an essay called Wealth in 1889, that a rich man is only a trustee for the poor, and that the man who dies thus rich dies disgraced. Thus rich, meaning rich and unspent. He gave away $350 million in his lifetime and funded 2,509 libraries. The terms were deliberate. He paid for the building. The town had to own the site and fund it forever at 10% of the grant every year. He was buying a commitment, not a monument. It was not universally welcome. 225 American communities turned the money down flat. Detroit rejected $750,000 in 1902. One steelworker said, "God forbid that one of my children should ever bring home a book from a Carnegie library." Eugene Debs called accepting it an everlasting shame. Both things are true at once. The libraries are still open, and the men whose labor built the money were locked out of the mill. And now the part that decides everything, because this channel is finally about what moves to the next generation. Andrew Carnegie had one child, a daughter, Margaret. Under his will she received nothing, not a reduced share, nothing. Article 3rd says only that a mother's love will be the best guide. She did have a trust, set up in 1911, of $4,643,000, and she could not touch the principal until her mother died in 1946, when Margaret was 49. Meanwhile, the 9 children of his brother Thomas received roughly $10 million each. His nieces and nephews got about twice what his own daughter got. Margaret herself, asked long afterwards how her father should be remembered, said, "Tell his life like it was. I am sick of the Santa Claus stuff. And there is no dynasty. His great-granddaughters farm sheep and cattle in Scotland, a few minutes from the castle he bought. The current Forbes list of America's richest families starts at $10 billion and contains no Carnegies at all. So strip away the steel and the libraries, and 3 things actually transfer from a weaver's son to you." Thomas Scott is the entire first act. Without one man deciding to lend a teenager the money for his first shares, there is no Carnegie. Find that person and then later be that person. He knew his costs to the 100th of a cent, and he still could not tell you what Homestead cost him. Next time on Empire Mechanics, the man who wrote the check, the banker who assembled the first billion-dollar corporation on Earth, who twice personally stopped run on the United States government, and who died believing the country still needed a king. J. Pierpont Morgan and the Mechanics of Money itself. Subscribe, and I will see you at the next Empire.